Coming up on The Charge on Air, the UCF Faculty Union shares its thoughts on the lack of raises.
The AI era continues as a new institute makes its way to UCF.
And the First Amendment is put to the test across the nation.
In sports, Knights football travels to Kansas to kick off its third Big 12 season.
The Charge on Air starts now. Good afternoon and welcome to The Charge on Air. I'm Lucas Miller.
And I'm Stephen Brown. Today is Friday, September 26, 2025.
On September 17th, the UCF Board of Trustees reopened Article 23 on the negotiating table for the 2025-2026 school year. Charge on Air reporter Victoria Pera tells us about their recent decision on faculty salary.
About a week and a half ago, the UCF Board of Trustees made a reopening proposal on Article 23, which covers faculty salaries, incentives, awards, and payments. The board chose to not give faculty salary increases for the 2025-26 school year, with a one-time payment set to be distributed December of this year. Members of the UCF Faculty Union are not satisfied with the board's proposal and are planning to challenge it with campaigning in the next coming months. President of the UCF Faculty Union, Dr. Talat Rahman, says the university's faculty raises are less than any other schools around the state, like UF, FSU, FIU, and many more.
Because, for us to see our students do well is really a reward. But that doesn't mean that we should be taken for granted. That doesn't mean that we should not be given cost of living increases. And that doesn't mean that high raises can be given to top administrators and not to us. It's a slap on our face. I mean, it really is.
The United Faculty of Florida is a primary organization that represents faculty and graduate assistants from universities statewide. The role involves collective bargaining for legally binding contracts that outline salary, benefits, and working conditions. The opinion from many members of the UCF Faculty Union is that they mostly disagree with the university's payment decisions and that they feel faculty is not viewed as a priority. The president of the State Faculty Union, Robert Castillo, says just this.
I think that's what's going on here today. I think UCF has the money. They just don't make their employees a priority as far as compensation goes.
Originally, back in April, the faculty union asked for an 8% increase to the employee's base salary. In return, they were met with zero. Rahman says she will keep working alongside the union to hopefully come to an agreement with the university. In Orlando, Victoria Pera, The Charge on Air.
UCF collective bargaining meetings happen every third Wednesday, so make sure to stay updated with any new developments on the Charge News.
Approval of up to $4 million in Capital Improvement Trust Funds funding was approved on Monday by the UCF Board of Trustees to renovate the student union. The funding will support design development, including renovation of the Pegasus Ballroom and replacement of the skylight in the main atrium. Renovation will also include the surrounding lobby spaces by the Pegasus Ballroom and a new exterior entry. A date has yet to be announced for when the renovating process will start, but we will keep you updated with any new information.
Fire trucks were lined up just outside of the Nicholson School of Communication and Media building Wednesday morning after a professor noticed an odd smell coming from inside room 113. Pulse Point, the Orange County Fire Rescue Department, received a call from academic advisor Melanie Socorro at 11:14 a.m. and evacuation orders followed 12 minutes later. The call was classified as a structured fire, bringing firemen from both Orange and Seminole County. Although some students were left wondering if they still had class, first responders gave Nicholson the all clear just an hour later at 12:19 p.m.
UCF announced this semester they are beginning an AI Institute with plans to have AI become more involved on campus. I had the chance to find out more about the institute.
Research says that AI would mainly be used in this building for information technology, or this building at financial institutions. But you might not realize that here, at the College of Arts and Humanities, faculty are participating in a new AI Institute. Dr. Peter Larson is the Associate Dean at the College of Arts and Humanities and a member of the Institute. He says workshops have been put on for faculty to discuss potential implications of AI in the classroom. However, Larson emphasized the importance of striking a balance between AI use and reliance.
Real human creativity, that can't be replaced. And so with the workshop, we're trying to find ways to make sure we kind of really focus on that the assignments we use, the work we assign, help students get a critical understanding, not just what AI can and can't do, but what they can and can't do.
At the College of Arts and Humanities, Larson uses AI to help him during research. But now the Institute will help faculty incorporate AI responsibly while also maximizing student success. One computer science major in particular tells me how the expansion of AI excites him about the opportunities in his field.
Gaurav Kanogia is a computer science major and vice president of AI at UCF. He says the Institute provides new ways to get involved with AI that may have been missing in the past.
It sort of helps promote AI within UCF, which is something that I think has been lacking for a couple of years. So I think that's great. People just getting into CS or other industries really do need to learn it, and people more interested in research can use the Institute to connect to different teachers and things.
Larson says the Institute is a year-long initiative, but AI is here to stay. In Orlando, Stephen Brown, The Charge on Air.
To keep up with all that's happening with AI on campus, be sure to follow AI at UCF on Instagram.
One UCF postdoctoral student is working on a research thesis that studies the effect on fatigue on quad muscles after involving a reconstruction in the ACL. Postdoctoral student Ava Schwartz says her quad-focused study aims to investigate people who suffered from injuries in the ACLR, which is a key stabilizer in the knee that helps control movement during quick stops, pivots, changes in directions. Schwartz is also comparing their performance with people who are not injured as their control group.
So the overall goal of our research is to understand the specific neuromuscular physiology behind physical impairments we see after ACL reconstruction to design therapeutic interventions that are more effective.
Schwartz uses electromyography, a test that shows how effective the muscle is and how the nervous system is communicating with it. She also relies on ultrasound to study the tissue itself and a special device to test emotional strength. Schwartz says her goal is to turn these findings into better rehab and long-term results for patients.
UCF President Dr. Alexander Cartwright announced Monday that UCF has reached the 12 metrics required to earn the designation of preeminent state research university by the Florida Board of Governors. These metrics include a 4-year rate of 60% and significant increases in research and patents. President Cartwright shared that his priority is to invest in the valuable faculty and staff who propel the university's excellence.
UCF President Dr. Alexander Cartwright announced Monday that UCF has reached the 12 metrics required to earn the designation of preeminent state research university by the Florida Board of Governors. These metrics include a 4-year rate of 60% and significant increases in research and patents. President Cartwright shared that his priority is to invest in the valuable faculty and staff who propel the university's excellence. Tropical storm Humberto is gaining strength as it spins across the Atlantic. While the 8th named storm of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season is predicted not to touch land, there is a possibility it will interact with another storm developing in the nearby western Atlantic. According to the CBS News meteorologist Nikki Nolan, if this collision does occur, it could produce what's called the Fujirama effect, a rare phenomenon that happens when two different storms merge and become entangled around a newly formed center.
There's clearly no shortage of storms here in Florida, right guys?
Yeah, enjoy the sunshine while it lasts because Florida loves to make it rain.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Allie, hit us with the forecast.
As usual, guys, it's hot and humid out here, so make sure to stay hydrated. Now let's take a look at our current conditions. It's currently 83 degrees with a humidity of 68%. Winds are northeast with 2 miles per hour and a chance of rain of 15%. Now back to you guys.
Thanks for that update, Allie. Coming up next, are First Amendment rights being overshadowed by censorship?
And Charlie Kirk leaves his mark on the national calendar. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Florida may never look the same again. Everyday issues like pollution, climate change, sea level rise, they threaten the beautiful nature here in our backyard. But here at UCF, you personally can receive funding to make a change. Students of all backgrounds are encouraged to apply for the Gulf Scholars Program. Funded by a grant from the National Academies of Sciences, this program prepares future leaders to solve some of the toughest issues our environment will face, all through team-based research and education right here at UCF. Participating students can receive mentorship from faculty in multiple fields, paid travel, and the chance to make up to $5,000 per year for each year in the program. Plus, Gulf scholars get the chance to go on unique adventures around Florida's Gulf Coast, showing them exactly why it should be protected up close. Undergraduate students in any major can apply at gulfscholars.research.ucf.edu.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know. How to safely build a fire. How to control the flames. What to do with hot coals. How to secure your chains.
There's no sparks.
But I can only teach wildfire prevention. Only you can prevent wildfires.
Recent events have caused some to question what qualifies as a direct violation of the First Amendment. Charge on Air reporter Casey Stone tells us more.
On September 10th, right-wing political activist Charlie Kirk was fatally shot while speaking at Utah Valley University. Because of his massive influence, the public was quick to express their opinions on Kirk's passing. But some of these comments have led to a little bit more than just a couple of reposts. According to the Chronicle of Higher Education, 40 university faculty staff members and 3 students have faced some sort of disciplinary action for what they've said about Kirk on social media. ABC also decided to take late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel off air after his opening monologue mocked how President Donald Trump appears to be grieving. These incidents and others have sparked debate on whether or not these retributions are a violation of the First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech. Political science professor Dr. Aubrey Jewett says one could argue either way, since there appears to be a bit of a gray area with professions that exist within the collision of the government and the private sector.
Some First Amendment scholars might say, look, the government is beginning to overstep, because although they are not directly firing someone or arresting them, they are putting some pressure on the private sector to do that.
Disney did announce that Jimmy Kimmel will be going back on air, citing insensitive jokes as the reason for the suspension. And although their control room will no longer be empty, senior film major Cameron O'Neill worries what this incident could mean for future film projects.
Filmmaking has been censored since basically it started. It's something that you have to live with, but also it definitely makes the job a lot harder. It dampens the creative expression, especially when you're making stuff of political nature.
O'Neill says that although he believes this censorship is dangerous, he's hopeful that things will work out, and that Jimmy Kimmel's return is proof that people have more power than they might think. Reporting in Orlando, Casey Stone, The Charge on Air.
Broadcasting groups Sinclair and Nexstar say that discussions with ABC are still ongoing about whether or not Jimmy Kimmel Live will return on their nearly 70 ABC affiliate stations.
The U.S. Senate and House of Representatives passed a resolution making October 14th a National Day of Remembrance for Charlie Kirk. On September 18th, Florida Senator Rick Scott called for the passage of his resolution in honoring the late Charlie Kirk. The senator's press release says that resolution passed with unanimous consent. The resolution lists Kirk's contributions and organizations he fostered throughout his life. Alex Abernat, a sophomore attendee of Turning Point UCF, says that this passage will motivate college students to open their eyes and speak up for what they believe in.
Big organization for a while that many people have been aware of, known of, but I think if anything it's just kind of like made his message and his organization louder, and I think it's gonna kind of open the eyes of a lot of college students.
Abernat says that this will be a good way to honor Kirk's life and everything that he built. The Day of Remembrance will fall on October 14th, Kirk's birthday. Senator Scott says Kirk's legacy will live on and be remembered for his love of God, family, and our country.
On Monday, September 29th, UCF is launching a new and improved My UCF portal. Get ready for a fresh look, faster access, and smarter features designed to make your experience even better. What's new? One place for all. Your essential tools, customizable dashboards, real-time campus updates, and a more powerful search function. The best part? You don't need to do a thing. The update will happen automatically.
College kids, hold on to your cups. Starbucks is brewing up some big changes. Yesterday, they announced that plans to cut a number of stores across the U.S. and Canada. The total number of stores will drop by about 1%, bringing the count to just under 18,300 locations. That means around 200 stores could be shutting their doors. But don't panic yet. After that, Starbucks plans to pour its energy into opening new stores and renovating over 1,000 existing locations.
President Trump has signed an executive order that clears the way for the United States to take majority ownership of TikTok. Under the current plan, the U.S. would own most of the company, while the Chinese patent company ByteDance would retain a smaller percentage. But the deal is not yet done. There are still major hurdles holding it up. The biggest issues include final regulatory approvals, questions about who will control TikTok's algorithm, and demands from U.S. officials for stronger data security guarantees. There's also concern that over-ensuring that China has zero access to U.S. user data. So while this executive order moves the process forward, the final sale is still being negotiated.
After the break, we'll tell you everything you need to know to stay dry this week.
Plus, UCF football honors the tragic loss of offensive line coach Sean Clark. Don't go anywhere. The Charge on Air will be right back.
Life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome. Prediabetes does. One in 3 adults has prediabetes, and you could be one of them. There are usually no signs for prediabetes, so it's important to understand your risk. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. And you can change the outcome. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test today. Go to doihaveprediabetes.org.
Love is a lesson that doesn't end. It knows no conditions, so you better buckle in. Love keeps you on your toes. It never stops, only grows. Love isn't easy. It's a commitment, especially when they're being their most resistant. Love is being prepared for the journey ahead. Love doesn't let any concerns go unsaid. Love is finding the right seat so you can take a breath. But remember, love isn't lax. It always double checks. Check that your kids are in the right seat at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Love protects.
Welcome back, everyone.
It's time to check in with student meteorologist Dominic Popolo from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University for a look at today's national forecast.
We're tracking two systems across the Atlantic right now. We've got Hurricane Humberto, which is going to be turning out to sea over the next couple of days. We also have a tropical wave located over Cuba and Haiti that's going to be heading north towards the Bahamas and the southeast as we head throughout the weekend. But before that, we've got the increased potential for moisture and rain over the southeast due to a stationary front that's over the Carolinas and Georgia. And along with that tropical wave on Sunday, it's going to be increasing the potential for rain down through Miami all the way up through the Carolinas. And going out west, we have the increased potential for rain in Arizona, New Mexico, and other areas of the Southwest. And it's not feeling like fall across the plains and the Midwest due to the potential for temperatures 15 to 20 degrees above normal. And that's due to an area of high pressure centered over Iowa. But for a look at what we can see in Florida, let's head back to UCF.
Thanks, Dominic. Now, Stephen, let's be real. How much longer do you think that we can handle this Florida heat?
I don't know, Lucas. To be honest, just wake me up when September ends. I mean, October can't come any sooner.
Well, luckily, it looks like student weather reporter Allyson Castillo has the wake-up call that you're looking for. How's the weather looking this week, Allie?
I hear you guys. I think we're all ready for some fall weather. But for now, this is the temperature, our current temperature for Florida this afternoon. So for starter, we have Gainesville at 82 degrees. And next to Gainesville, we got Palm Coast at 83 degrees. Down in Leesburg, we got 83 degrees. Also with Winter Haven. And here in Orlando, we have 84 degrees. Down to Tampa, we have 86 degrees. And down to the coast, we got 85 degrees in Melbourne. So stay hydrated, have your umbrellas ready. And now, currently, we could look ahead our 5 days forecast. So starting off with Saturday, we have 90 degrees with a low of 74, with 54% of rain. Sundays, we have 87 degrees with a 74 low, and then 24% of chance of rain. And during Monday, it's 89 high with a 72 low with 7% of rain. And looking at the same as Tuesday and Wednesdays, lows 71 and 55% rain. So guys, please have your umbrellas ready. You never know when it's gonna rain. Now, back to Lucas and Steven.
Coming up next, UCF football gets ready to touch down in Kansas to open its third ever Big 12 campaign.
In women's volleyball, UCF recorded its 800th win all time. Your UCF sports update is almost here.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. Those 9 months were also 273 days of planning. What about your daughter's first costume party? It was out of this world. And let's not forget those barbecues you plan in detail for your family and your more vegetarian by the day best friends. That surprise party for your parents' golden anniversary? You get the golden planning. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
I don't remember how it started. Our back and forth. Victory. Fumble. Repeat. It always came back.
Dad! Okay, here we go, throw it! Yeah.
You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Nice.
busy it is at UCF right now.
Good afternoon, Knights. My name is Christie St Vil, and I'm here to bring you the latest updates on everything UCF sports. Let's get into it. UCF offensive line coach Sean Clark passed away on Sunday at the age of 50. Weeks after being rushed to the hospital with a medical emergency on September 9th, Clark had to be taken to the hospital again on Sunday, where he later lost his life. Clark was a veteran coach with over 2 decades of experience. He joined the UCF family in December of last year. Head coach Scott Frost says Clark's passing has really put football into perspective.
I think it puts football in perspective. You know, one of my first messages to the team every year is, let's be great at football. Football's what we do. We love football. Football's not life. And I think every time something like this happens, it makes you realize as fanatic as people get about winning and losing a game on Saturdays, it's trivial compared to real things in life.
Perfect. UCF plans to honor the late offensive line coach with the helmet decal later this season. Toto, this isn't Orlando anymore. The Knights will hit the road this weekend to face Kansas State on Saturday and begin Big 12 play. This matchup will be a few different firsts for the Knights this season, all while processing the loss of offensive line coach Sean Clark. Charge on Air reporter Stephen Brown has more.
UCF football will be outside the bounce house for the first time this season on Saturday. The Knights face off against Kansas State in their first Big 12 game of the season. Defensive coordinator Alex Grinch says the challenge to play in front of a hostile road crowd can strengthen the defense.
Adversity, as much as you feel it at home, it kind of rains down on you on the road. And so then you got to decide if a bunch of guys in purple are clapping, if that's going to wreck you.
Behind me is the Acrisure Bounce House Stadium, where the UCF Knights have played their first 3 games of the season, all coming from out-of-conference play. But now the UCF Knights will travel to Manhattan, Kansas, where they'll take on the Kansas State Wildcats for their first road and Big 12 test of the year. While it may be their biggest game of the season so far, the UCF family has found it difficult to focus on football following the passing of offensive line coach Sean Clark.
You know, from my standpoint, I just miss my friend. I wasn't around him as long as I've been around some other people, but, you know, he just had an energy and a spirit about him, and one of my favorite guys I've ever been around and coached with. So it's just a tough deal, but we got a football game to play too.
The UCF football coaches all echoed how tragic the loss of their colleague and friend was, but are motivated to play hard for Clark on Saturday. In Orlando, Stephen Brown, The Charge on Air.
The Knights will kick off at noon and look for their first ever win over the Wildcats. That's all, folks. Stay tuned for more updates on UCF sports next week. Back to you, Stephen and Lucas.
That's our time for right now. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can always keep up with us during the week on thechargesnews.com.
And stay tuned after the show to see an episode of the Golf at Night podcast produced by the UCF Golf Scholars Program. We'll be back next week, but for now, we'll leave you with a shot of live at International Drive. Thanks for watching and have a good day.
Hello, welcome to the Golf Scholars. Hello, welcome to the Golf Scholars Golf at Night podcast. We're here today with Dr. John Weishample. He is currently the interim dean of the College of Graduate Studies and a professor of biology, professor in the Department of Biology. You've had several different roles over the years. I've noticed that you specialize in landscape ecology. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'd love to delve more into what your current role is at UCF, and if you want to talk more about what you do currently.
Okay. Well, my current role as interim dean is really trying to become an advocate for graduate studies across UCF. I work both with graduate students and postdoctoral scholars. They're kind of our two domains. Now, the way the College of Graduate Studies works is it really is a service college, with the idea that we're provided added value to different programs across UCF. We try to ensure that our students are successful and our postdocs are successful as best we can. We try to provide resources in a way that will help them achieve success. Some of our metrics are, looking at, what our graduate students are able to accomplish during the time here at UCF and what we can do to help facilitate their success.
And that's incredible. It's definitely very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I think about graduate education, when I look at my life and how much it impacted me, I mean, most of UCF is largely populated by undergraduate students, but I think it's about 15% of our students are graduate students. So a lot of our undergraduates aren't necessarily aware of what it means to become a graduate student. But it's really an opportunity to really kind of develop a more focused area of study. Some students do it for career advancement. Some do it to just learn. Some students are kind of exploring opportunities in the process. And what I've learned is that it's really a transformative time for a lot of students. They come in, with some ideas of, what they want to accomplish. And they hopefully have accomplished some of them or maybe changed their trajectories a little bit. And our goal is to try to help them, kind of along their journey.
Yeah, graduate studies definitely do open a lot of doors for a lot of students. And I think it's definitely important to make sure that students are aware of these opportunities and have different avenues to explore them. Yeah, I think that's definitely very important work. So you had many different positions over the years. Many different positions.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I kind of think about my trajectory, I was a graduate student in environmental sciences. I did my undergraduate work in biology, then I went on to get my master's and doctorate degrees in environmental sciences. During that time, I was funded through NASA, and I was an early recipient of one of what they used to call, I think, Global Change Fellowships. And so my work actually, as a graduate student, my master's work was based in Australia, where I was looking at rainforest fragmentation. And my doctoral work was focused more in the boreal forest, or actually it's the coastal rainforest of Alaska, where what we were doing is looking at how remote sensing can measure forest change. Where I was focused, I was in Glacier Bay, Alaska, which is a kind of a hotbed of research to look at what's called succession, forest succession, looking at change over time. Glacier Bay is kind of a special place because John Muir spent a lot of time there. A lot of ecologists kind of cut their teeth there because what you're able to do is look at how plant communities change as a result over time as the glaciers receded. The glacier I was focused on is actually called Muir Glacier, which John Muir, his name was given to it. But what you're able to see is how it has retreated over the last 150 years or so. But as it retreats, it opens up new land that plants are able to colonize, and then you're able to follow the kind of what happens over time because you have what's called a chronosequence. So at the very edge of the glacier, you'll have a very young plant community, but at where the glacier was 150 years ago, or even further, 500 years ago, you'll have a much older community. So it enables you to kind of look at, in a closed space, all the different kind of ecological communities.
That's incredible. You get to see a progression.
Absolutely.
Of species.
Absolutely.
That's really incredible. So I want to ask, like, what are the different positions you've had over the past?
Yeah.
What would you say was your favorite one?
Oh yeah. So after I did a postdoc then at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, which is in Greenbelt, Maryland, and that was fun because I got to learn more about remote sensing, and at that time, I started working with a few engineers and a geologist who were really at the forefront of using laser remote sensing. And I can think about the time where I saw a presentation from the geologist and the engineer. And And they were basically describing the fact that they were getting what they considered, or I don't want to belittle their knowledge, but they weren't so much interested in the forests on top of the land, but they recognized that could be valuable information for ecologists because they were really interested in the shape of the land, the geomorphology. They were looking at volcanoes and looking at geodynamics. How could you use lasers to measure things like landscape changes, but looking at the hard land. And what they realized is that there's information on top with the lasers because the lasers are bouncing off vegetation at the same time.
Yeah.
And we were able to take that over the years and really expand upon that idea, and that was kind of really instrumental. But in terms of my favorite job, it was when I came to UCF. I mean, really. I came to UCF. I was 30 years younger. I was kind of at the beginning of my science career. And I had a number of students, undergraduate and graduate students, who you could really see how fascinated they were with their subject area and how engaged they were. And here they were able to play with, really novel toys at the time. We were, working with remote sensing, working with advanced computers, working with geographic information systems. And this was at a time where that wasn't commonplace, where now it's pretty commonplace. But these students were really able to explore, avenues of data and really try to understand what are the implications of these new data. The laser data, we were probably one of the few labs in the U.S., if not the world, that had access to this. And then the students were able to explore the data on their own, and they came up with a variety of questions that were interesting. So I think it was really the interaction with students that I think was my most favorite. But moving from my basically my faculty role as an assistant, associate, and full professor to my current role as an interim dean, the transition I think goes like this. As a professor or faculty member that's really engaged with students, you're really kind of focused on your research area and trying to ensure that your students are benefiting by the research that you're doing and learning from that and creating their own research. But now my role, I think, is a little bit more trying to benefit the broader UCF community. So although I've worked in a number of fields, I'm very interdisciplinary in nature. I worked with engineers. I worked with College of Business folks. I've worked with some people in some of the other colleges. But this, in the dean role, I'm kind of involved with all the graduate programs and really trying to ensure that our students in these programs are, really able to take their lives from point A to hopefully point B, which they consider an improvement in their lives and hopefully gives them a start to their careers and, trying to develop those trajectories for those students. And so it's kind of a different role, a broader role, but I kind of miss some of the hands-on activities that I had with the students.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you have a lot of, like you very much enjoy cultivating these learning experiences and making sure that students have the resources to explore what they want to explore.
Absolutely. And really that is a lot of my role that I'm involved with now is really to advocate for students, to try to bring in resources for students. Some of the resources might involve helping them travel to their research sites or helping them publish, what they've learned, through their education. And at the same time, trying to promote UCF as well, because I want future students to recognize that UCF is really a hotbed of activity and really could serve as a really good, strong component of their careers. There was just an article that came out, I think it was in India Times, which was talking about computer science programs. And I've worked with some computer scientists here at UCF over the years, but it basically said in this article, it was like, well, there's the Ivy Leagues that, if you're a student in India and maybe you want to try getting the Ivy Leagues, but if you can't get the Ivy Leagues, here are 10 other universities that have exceptional computer science programs, and UCF was in that 10. So, that kind of made me feel at least a little bit proud, and, with the idea that we have the ability to elevate, these students that can come to UCF and help their careers.
Yeah, I have a few, I've known a few people who've done different graduate programs at UCF, and they definitely say it's some of the best in the state. So I think you've done an incredible job there. So one thing I wanted to talk about is, I know that you're not as hands-on as you were before, but what made you want to get into ecology and those sort of sciences? I know we talked about it earlier. But
No. This is kind of, I as an undergraduate, I started off. This isn't normally the trajectory of students these days, but I really just wanted to learn as much as I could possibly learn, right? And what I thought, would be interesting, and this was maybe inspired by a particular professor I had. His name was Norm Christensen. He taught plant ecology. I remember taking that my sophomore year. But what I became enamored with was the idea of learning how nature works, as best I could. And nature, for me, was living organisms. How do living organisms work in natural settings? So kind of different from medicine, trying to really understand this broad swath of species, and how do they interact? How do they change over time? How do they adapt? How do they basically work together in different ecosystems? And Norm Christensen was definitely inspirational. And then I had subsequent mentors over the time. I started taking courses in plant physiology, plant anatomy, and just kind of moving in. So I started off kind of as a plant ecologist by training. And then, going to graduate school, my focus was forests, trying to understand forested systems. I started off in tropical forests, moved to tropical rainforest, then temperate rainforest. I worked in boreal forests and a variety of forested systems. But my advisor, what he did was interesting in the time, was he developed these models to try to simulate forests. How do forests change over time? Well, if you kind of go back to the mid-1800s, early American, he was a Renaissance person, Henry David Thoreau. And Thoreau, he studied forest succession, but he realized that forests live longer than he does. Trees might be 200 years, where his lifespan might be 50 years. And so what he did was he looked at the forest and looked at the seeds in the forest and looked at the younger plants in the forest. And what he was able to do is predict that the forest that I currently see in New England won't resemble the forest in 100 years, because the forest will change.
Yeah.
And so what my advisor at graduate school did was he developed these simulation models that would help predict those changes over broad scales. And so, if we in some way alter the trajectory of these forests, maybe there's a fire, or maybe we clear them and let them reestablish. What he's realized is that the successional path may change from its natural path. Now, forests and ecological systems in general are fascinating to me because they're basically in a relatively perpetual stage of disturbance. Some disturbances are bigger than others. In Florida, hurricanes represent one of our big natural disturbances that come by. But humans are also a huge disturbance, as well. And so these gave me opportunities to basically develop models to understand forest change over time, taking into consideration the different types of disturbances that can lead to some of these changes.
That's incredible. Yeah, we went to that recent trip to, I believe it was Homosassa. Was that what it was? Yes. And we saw the effects that hurricanes had on the forest there. Like even it's been a couple of months since the last hurricane, that you could still see the damage they left behind.
Oh, you can see it for many decades after. So one of my studies areas was in central Massachusetts at Harvard Forest. there was a hurricane, I think it was 1939, and this was before they actually named hurricanes. So they called it the Long Island Express because it kind of went right up, cut through Long Island, went right through Connecticut, and then basically destroyed all these forests in central Massachusetts. It was kind of the largest reclamation project where they, all this downed wood, and they basically harvested all the downed wood. And then using LiDAR, we were able to show the effects of this about 70 years after the forest.
It's incredible.
But really, I think some of those trajectories would last a lot longer than decades. Some might go into centuries, as some of these trees live to be a few hundred years old.
So there might be a lot of changes we don't even notice yet.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. So, trying to predict those changes, is interesting. Maybe for you and me, maybe we don't care what happens in 100 years, but maybe our successors will. And so
someone
for
will
us to
care
predict.
eventually.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I think it's definitely very important to bring attention to this.
Another kind of, you mentioned the coast of Homosassa, and looking at hurricanes, and another kind of coastal forest impact that is something I've been interested in, and now I see a lot of people are studying this. As what's called ghost forests. Have you heard the term ghost forest?
I haven't heard before.
Well, ghost forests, you can see them up and down the East Coast, and I'm sure, you can see them down the Keys too. And what's happened is with sea level rise and saltwater intrusion, the forests are dying off. And so what you see is at the edge of the coast, some of these forested systems, the trees are dropping their leaves, and basically you have just snags, dead trees that are appearing across large landscapes. And so people are looking at that as, kind of a current impact that we're making associated with sea level rise.
Do you think that ghost forests are, is something that we should be worried about, or an indicator or something?
Well, it certainly will change the habitat. So there are different species that will be able to use them, but also one of the kind of associated impacts that maybe we want to be concerned with is we're creating basically a positive feedback, meaning that forests are really good at taking in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So if these forests are now dying, we've reduced the ability of those trees to bring in carbon dioxide. And so if you think about the feedback, what happens next is that means there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that also means that would increase to more warming, increasing sea level rise.
Well,
so you have this
trees, yes, that is definitely an issue. Especially, I think now we need to be more aware of sea level rise, warming, and just put more policies into place to try to, counter that. Because I think ghost trees are a very good indication of the consequences of what's happening.
Yes, I agree.
I want to talk, I know you have a lot of studies also focusing on the coast. One of the themes that we're covering in this podcast is light pollution. How it can affect the wildlife and ecosystems in Florida. This was a while ago, but in 2016, you were part of a study that covered how coastal lighting affected sea turtle nesting. I want to talk, what made you want to do that study, and what did you gather from that study?
Well, there are a couple things that motivated me to do this. As I did my postdoc at NASA, I really did get to experience a variety of remote sensing techniques. And I always try to think, well, how can we monitor systems on a broad scale? Because that's what remote sensing allows, using satellites or airborne sensors, is to try to get a broader perspective of what's going on. Now, when I moved from Maryland, from NASA down to Florida, I wasn't as enthused about the forests in Florida. And some of the people who I worked with, it turns out that I think this might be a truism, is that you tend to work with people who you're adjacent to. And turns out that the foremost sea turtle expert in the state occupied the office next to mine. Wow. And Lou Earhart was a prominent biologist in University of Central Florida. And over his tenure here at UCF, he had developed a monitoring system to basically monitor nesting behaviors of sea turtles along the Melbourne area of Florida. And he had monitored them year in, year out for At the time when I started working with him, it may have been about 20 years, 15, 20 years. But he had basically this long time collection of sea turtle nesting patterns I think it was probably about a 30-kilometer area. And so I started kind of looking at those data, and I started studying, how things have changed over time. And one of the things that we found was that the sea turtles started nesting earlier over time. And so we can look at about this 20-year span, and we can say, something's going on. The sea turtles are nesting earlier. And what we posited is that part of the reason for this is global warming. And so we were able to look at how sea surface temperature related to sea turtle nesting. And we did this on a small scale. But then other scientists started following this up as well. So at the time, the satellites that we were looking at sea surface temperatures. And so we were doing this relationship, sea surface temperatures to sea turtle nesting. And the more I got involved with this, some of my students, I basically inherited Doc Earhart's students. So I had these sea turtle students that I was working with once he retired. So I would have these sea turtle students. And, the more I started thinking about, behavior, sea turtle nesting behavior, we realized, and they've known this for years, is that sea turtles, especially the hatchlings, the ones that are just coming out of the nest, direct their movement based on light. And so if there's a moon that's over the ocean, where it's well lit, they'll go towards the ocean. However, they can be distracted if there's lights behind them, let's say on the roads. And so these hatchlings may crawl out towards the roads or the highways. And so Florida had put in place over time these restrictions in terms of, lighting along the coast because they didn't want to see, hatchlings, crushed on the roads, right? And so I started thinking about this at a broader scale. There was a study in Israel which basically did something that I thought I could emulate in Florida. The study in Israel was looking at satellite measurements of light along the coast, and they were relating to sea turtles. Now, I thought to myself, well, Israel is one place to study sea turtles, but we have a lot more here. And we actually had a longer record of some of the satellite-based light sources. And so kind of putting two things together, I said, well, one of my former students who now works for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, she was responsible for all the nesting surveys across the whole state. And so now I was able to take those data and working with, actually my son was involved with this, and working with a master's student, we were able to basically replicate at a broader scale, both space and time, with 3 species of sea turtles that nest in Florida for what was almost the entire state. Because we just had these very extensive sea turtle nesting data that Doc Earhart kind of initiated years ago, but then it was expanded across the whole state.
It all came back around.
It did. And I think that's fun when you can kind of piece together, different interests that people have. At some level, some of my research kind of served as a glue for disparate areas, and one of my early jobs in the College of Graduate Studies is I directed interdisciplinary studies. And I think that might have been in part because, I have these eclectic interests, and trying to help students who walk into graduate school who maybe don't know exactly what they want to do associated with a particular discipline, but sometimes they think outside the box. And the program, Interdisciplinary Studies program, would allow them to explore some of their maybe varied interests.
Yeah, I think definitely the Old Grove Scholars program is an interdisciplinary program. And I think the study you mentioned is definitely a good example of how different disciplines can work together to create a success story. And I think that's definitely a really good example of how interdisciplinary studies are very important.
I think they're critical. They actually, when you think about disciplines, it's often at the interfaces of disciplines where the interesting things are happening. And then if you really think, in a broad sense, some of the problems that we're facing, the solutions are not singular discipline solutions, because one, humans typically are involved. So it's critical to make sure that we have, sociologists involved. It's critical we have people who can communicate as well. And scientists cover a broad swath, and then you have engineers that often help to design solutions. But it really does represent kind of this complex systems. If we want to really solve some of our issues that we're faced with, it requires many people involved. As you mentioned, I've been involved in coastal studies for a while, and through this process, if I kind of think about the people involved, we had coastal engineers, we had ecologists I studied more vegetation, but we had ecologists who study oyster beds. We had communicators, we had sociologists, we had policymakers. Really, if we want to develop these solutions, it does require bringing a lot of people together who can speak languages, hopefully understand each other in a way that we can find solutions. One of my sabbaticals, if you want to say, but I took a couple years off when I was at UCF, and I worked at the National Science Foundation, and I oversaw a program called the NSF Research Traineeship Program. And the focus of that was developing novel interdisciplinary graduate studies. And these are usually based on particular problems. Climate change was always one of the key areas, but you could really find these interdisciplinary problems across different scientific domains.
You mentioned the Gulf Coast and vegetation in the Gulf Coast. Have you done any studies on vegetation in the Gulf Coast and how it's been affected or impacted?
Yeah, so let me describe one study that we were involved with. And this was really led from Jim Morris from University of South Carolina. He's a marshlands ecologist. But trying to understand sea level rise effects on marshes, we were focused at this time in Apalachicola. Beautiful bay system, Apalachicola, which suffered a lot of oyster declines. But what we were trying to understand was, given sea level rise impacts, how would that change the marshes? So marshes, like forests, are really good at absorbing carbon dioxide, and they were undergoing a lot of change. And what Jim did was he built these things they called marsh ladders, which was kind of like similar to a Corona sequence in a way, where what you tried to do is replicate within the system what it means if sea level were to rise. So if you plant these marsh grasses at different elevations right along the waterline, you're able to simulate sea level rise effects. Some of your plants, your pots will basically be lower, some of your pots will be higher, and you're able to see the growth changes that would occur. So it's kind of like it's a indirect kind of experimental approach to figure out how sea level rise will affect the marsh composition in both species composition and also structure, in terms of their ability to grow and capture carbon. So, that was kind of an interesting study we had done there in Apalachicola.
It's definitely very interesting. I think that vegetation is definitely very much at risk with all different issues affecting Florida, like sea level rise. Is there anything else that could be affecting vegetation?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, or some of the disturbances that we're faced with as hurricanes is a big one. And if we think about, sea level rise, but also sea level rise also impacts hurricane effects. And sea level rise can exaggerate hurricane effects, meaning that, storm surges can be more dramatic. And so one of the groups I worked with were these coastal engineers, these simulation modelers. Brilliant student, brilliant. There was actually a series of students. It's hard for me to pin down one of them because it really was a team effort. But Scott Hagan led this effort with a number of his students and some of his co-faculty members, Pete Bacoblis, Stephen Medeiros, Kareem Alizad. They worked together to help develop these simulation models to better understand how storm surges will impact these coastal systems. Now, bringing it back to some of my LIDAR studies, what's things that I didn't consider, but working with these coastal ecologists, it's something that they realized was critical. Now, if you think about water flowing over a landscape, well, the ability of water to move from point A to point B depends on what's in the way, right?
Yeah.
And they call that friction coefficients. So the type of structures or vegetation that is across the landscape will impact the degree to which water will infiltrate or roll across the landscape. So using lasers now, we're able to measure the friction coefficients of the landscapes, and we're able to put them into the models. So, if we're trying to connect those dots again, we're taking remote sensing, using remote sensing to understand vegetation structure, and then because of the vegetation structure and how it's dispersed across the landscape, we're able to predict how water then will flow and disturb the broader landscape when there's a storm surge associated with hurricanes.
I definitely remember hearing when Atlanta got flooded. I don't remember when it was. I think it was like a year or two ago that it got flooded. I remember hearing that a reason why that happened is because of the landscape. The landscape wasn't well suited for that. And otherwise, it might have stopped some of that flooding from happening.
And if you think about what we're doing, trying to accommodate storm surges, we're creating, sometimes we have hard barriers, some we have living shorelines. We're trying to figure out how are we able to engineer landscapes that may be more resilient or maybe more protective of landscapes further away from the ocean. So we're trying to learn, how we can, try to replicate some things that Mother Nature does, in these systems.
Yeah, I think it's definitely very important. That's something that we need to focus more on. And going back to that, what are some things you think we should do, especially with sea level rise? What are some things that you think should be implemented, like policies and such, that could help counter or combat sea level rise or help with the effects that it has?
Yeah. I hate to be pessimistic, but, sometimes the obvious ones are the most difficult ones to do. The obvious ones are reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, we haven't been able to do that. And, we can talk about it over and over and try to do our best to communicate it. But I think the sad take-home message is that it's not where the money is. There's no money right now in trying to remove or not put as much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as we're currently doing. There are people that are trying to come up with engineering techniques to extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Maybe that'll work, maybe not. So what we're faced with right now is sea level's going to rise. The speed with which it rises, that's maybe a little bit speculative, but on geologic records, it looks like it's going to rise more rapidly than they've seen for long periods of time. And certainly the measurements are showing that. So to combat it, I don't know if there's actually a way to combat it. It's more like, how do we live with it?
Yeah, that's a good
How
point.
can we somehow recognize the fact that we can't hold back the water? Maybe small areas, we might be able to protect. And sadly, those areas that we're going to be able to protect are those that probably represent the most wealth. So those enclaves that people really have the money and they want to protect, is something they'll focus on. And those might be, cities that, represent wealthier, power, individuals, but the other areas are going to be very difficult to protect. And when I really think about some of the kind of pessimism, again, I hate doing this, but
That's okay.
one of the ecologists we had at UCF, who was probably one of the world's most renowned conservation biologists. His name was Reed Noss. And Reed, he studied many things. And he posed this question, which I really took to heart. We're spending, I'd say, billions of dollars to restore the Everglades. This has been an ongoing effort, since the Army Corps, damned it, indicted and things, in the early 1900s, and multiple changes subsequently. But where he pointed out was, all this restoration may be worthless because, sea level's coming, and so those landscapes around the Everglades are going to be flooded. The river of grass, is a freshwater system, but the seawater, the saltwater system's coming in. And so some of our efforts to restore it may not be putting it in the right place. Not restore it, but maybe hold on to a few pieces is maybe what might be a better way to invest money. What are those areas that maybe are we most likely to be able to save, another thing. Because we can't build a wall around the Everglades. I mean, that's not going to help anything. But are there areas that maybe we can provide, natural shorelines, or just thinking ahead, changing some of the
that we can preserve?
Patterns? Hopefully.
That we can preserve them?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, not to interrupt you guys too hard. How far along are you down your question?
Mostly done.
Mostly, we want to try to wrap up ideally in the next 5 minutes.
Got it.
We're running on an S.
Yes, yeah. Okay, got it. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say that then our focus should be on adapting to.
I think so.
Yeah, adapting.
I think that's really what we have to do, and we have to adapt our social systems, as well as our natural systems as best we can.
Yeah. So what is, for the average listener or viewer, what should they be taking home from all of this? What would you say is the most important thing?
Well, the world's going to change. I mean, that may sound Buddhist in philosophy, but we are transient. And understand that what we have right now, your children will have a different view. What we have now will be different in the next 100 years. Is that better or worse? Well, it's different. Maybe we can make it better, though, if we think about it. Recognizing that there's some things that we might be able to change, some things we can't change. Identifying which are those things that we can change. Now, at the same time, we shouldn't give up efforts to reduce carbon dioxide. That's the driving force. So if there are ways that we can kind of, at least instead of going up 2 degrees Celsius, maybe we can bring it back to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 1 degree Celsius, maybe. But certainly, one of my graduate students said, he gave this analogy, if you're going down a hill, you don't necessarily want to put your foot on the gas pedal, right? And maybe that's what we have to think of. What are things that we can maybe reduce our overall impact? So that might be a way to think about it. There aren't easy solutions. This is a global problem. And as I mentioned, things haven't been getting better, even though we've become more and more aware of the problems.
Yeah, so it's definitely important to understand what you can do, but also accept that, accept what's going to happen, basically, and try to adapt to it.
You did a better job than I.
All right, so one thing I wanted to talk about is most of our listeners are probably going to be college students.
Mm-hmm.
And for any students that are interested in, going into research, going to graduate school, do you have any tips for them?
Yeah. Try it out as an undergrad. I mean, meet some graduate students, work in a lab, work in the field. Graduate students, we have a great program which is just starting. It's called the Knights Research Scholarship Program, CRISP, okay? And what this does, it provides undergraduate students opportunities to work in research arenas that are basically organized by graduate students and postdoctoral scholars. And right now we have 20 projects. We hope to expand this up to about 50 projects. We currently have 120 undergraduates involved. We have the idea this is going to grow into the multiple hundreds of graduate students as we produce it forward. But what it does is give you a taste and a flavor of what graduate students do. Graduate school is not for everybody. College isn't for everybody. But try it out, see what you like, see what you don't like. And I think that's one of the things to understand also is that, just let's say if you don't like one particular discipline of research, well, there's many others out there that you might benefit from or kind of creative activities that you might be involved with. But like what you're doing right now, this is, as in the jargon term, it's a high impact practice, which means that you're getting experience beyond your coursework here as an undergraduate student here at UCF, which I think is critical because, you can learn so much taking courses and taking tests, but really where the rubber hits the road is when you're starting to apply your knowledge and trying to, explore, your skills and develop some of those skills. And the classroom, it has limitations, for that. So for an undergraduate student interested in going to graduate school, go beyond your comfort zone. We know you can take classes. You've done that as a high school student and before you were high school. Do other things that will expand some of your experiences.
Go beyond your comfort zone. That's a great message. All right, so I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for your time, all you said. Before you go, do you want to share anything about you're working on at the moment? Or
Yeah, okay. It might sound a little mundane, but one of my goals is to improve or increase graduate student stipends. And this is actually a national effort, it turns out. It's, UCF is one school that we can demonstrate needs to do better. The cost of living in Orlando is pretty high. If we look since COVID, rental rates have gone up among the highest in the U.S. Our graduate student stipends have not matched that increase. So we've worked with different groups across campus. We've been able to, starting January 2026, the stipend level for graduate research assistants on new grants will meet a minimum, which is equivalent to some of our peers. But we need to do that with graduate teaching assistants next.
I think that's definitely true. Good point about the living rates down here. I live in downtown Orlando, and I can definitely attest to the high cost of living down there.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. It's definitely great. Thank you again so much for your time.
Yeah.
And this was, we learned a lot here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.